And happy Saturday morning, and welcome to this 11th edition of the second season of Fantasy Football Come True. I'm your host, Rodney Funderburk. You can catch Fantasy Football Come True right here on Tobacco Road Sports Radio every Saturday morning, 8 a.m., where we're just having a good time show where we talk a little fantasy in order to help put some green in your jeans. And, of course, I'm joined by my co-host, Ron Fun. Ron Fun is down in Raleigh, North Carolina. Ron Fun, how you doing today, my man?
Hey, man, I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Everything is lovely. Everything is lovely. And then, of course, we are joined by another Mr. Fantasy Football Aficionado, Mr. Nostradamus Nate. He is back again for the second time on Fantasy Football Come True. Nate, welcome to the show. Thanks for being on. It is a pleasure to have you. How's everything going in your world?
Well, thanks for having me back, fellas. I'm really pumped to be back on the show with you two good brothers. I appreciate the invite to return and talk some more about our shared passion of DFS, right? Well, hopefully helping the people with some suggestions for their Week 11 lineups, put a little extra cheddar in their bank accounts when Sunday evening rolls around, right?
Yes, sir.
Nate, that's what we're here for, Big Daddy, to help the masses out while in addition helping ourselves. And you know how that goes. So, of course, we are in Week 11. My Cowboys, they tried to get back on track against those Atlanta Falcons last week, but we got a hell of a game tomorrow against Patrick Mahomes and those Chiefs. And as you can see, Nate, Ron Fun is trying to rub a little Chiefs in my face with all his Kansas City gear. Yeah. Now, you know, as long as I've been in his brother, and it's been quite a long time, I ain't never seen him with his Kansas City gear on, man. He going to pull it out as soon as my Cowboys are playing the Chiefs. You see how you doing, me, Nate? You see how you doing?
Yeah. Anything to spite the bro, you know? A little friendly rivalry, brotherly rivalry.
Hey, man, I'm just focused on points, baby. I'm just focused on points. That's all.
Hey, that's it. You're exactly right. That's what you got to be focused on. And with a game like the Cowboys and the Chiefs, there should be some good points coming out of that game. So, fellas, we don't have long. We're going to jump right into it. There are a few games last week that we felt would be some pretty high-scoring games. The first game we mentioned was the Atlanta-Dallas game. That was a 46-point game. Of course, it was a little lopsided. Most of the points, except for 3, came from the Dallas Cowboys. Of course, we had speculated on the Minnesota LA Chargers game, which wound up being a 47-point game. And of course, the Tampa Bay Washington game. I know, Ron, you were up on that one. It wound up being a 48-point game. However, we didn't think Tom Brady would lose that one, but he did. So, you know, the one game that we did, didn't expect, that was the highest scoring game, at least I didn't expect, that was that Bills-Jets game, which had 62 points. So there was some serious points coming out of that game. So, guys, let's recap what you guys did last week. Nate, I'm going to start with you. How was your week last week? And just let us know how things went with you.
Yeah, well, my Vikes got a W. That was a pretty fantastic part of my week 10. Me and the other Vikes fans were really happy about that win. But I got to say, as a long-suffering Vikings fan, this is so typical of the Queens, right? They tease their fans with just a minuscule amount of hope for making the postseason run and then hugely disappoint by coming up short at the end of the season, right? So whether falling short of making the playoffs or making the playoffs, making a run that includes the Minneapolis Miracle. Y'all remember that one against the Saints?
Yes.
And then following that up by a drubbing by the Eagles in the NFC Championship to fall short of, the ultimate prize. So I don't know, you fellas may relate to this one. This is an analogy that Vikes fans resonates with Vikes fans, but it's kind of like back in the day, that super popular girl that you put down your best game to get her to go to the homecoming dance with you. And she just kind of teased you, kind of strung you along to maybe the day before the dance, and then just crushed your spirit by instead going with the captain of the football team. Yeah, that's pretty much sums up, the Vikings fan experience year after year. So excuse my rant. It's a result of VFTS, Viking Fan Traumatic Syndrome. So, yeah, man. But
Nate, I feel your pain. I completely feel your pain, Nate. The only problem with that analogy, though, is I was the captain of the football team.
Yeah, I was too. So it really doesn't apply as much. But, I did have a great week 10, though, from a DFS perspective. and added
No
some
doubt.
significant giblets to the Nostradamus Nate DraftKings account. So, we talked a lot on the show a couple of weeks ago leading into week 10 about, sticking to the process. And, that's what I did in week 10. On the last show, we talked about that Bills versus Jets game that had one of the highest game totals, and the Bills had the highest implied team total. And so we advised, stacking at least the Bills side in tourneys. And so did that, went with Josh Allen to Diggs. And Diggs finally, had a breakout game. He had 8 receptions, I think around 162 yards, and put one in the box. So, that was a nice 30 burger plus on the score. We also, talked about this strategy of running it back, right? So I actually did have somebody on the Jets side of the ball, Michael Carter, running back for the Jets, and had a nice game. He also got in the box at a really cheap price for 18 points at that cheap price. That was a nice kind of add to the bottom line. And then something else we talk about on this show, tourney strategy, is playing the ownership game, right? And so, there was a few really good low-priced running backs in Dearness Johnson, Mark Ingram, even Michael Carter, who ended up playing nicely for me. But basically, ownership flocked to those guys, right? And so, before submitting my lineups, I took a look at the ownership projections and saw 2 players that I always smash. We got McCaffrey and Dalvin Cook. Mm-hmm. Both were at projected to be single-digit ownership, right? So I slammed those guys into my lineup, and clearly both of them went off at, again, low ownership. So that really gave me leverage on the field. And so, I'm looking forward to actually talking about a similar type of strategy that we can apply to week 11 because of how the slate is setting up. So looking forward to talking about that a little later in the show. And you see what I did there? I just teased the audience just like the Vikings teased the fan base.
Nate, excellent work, my man. That's what we need on the show. Listen, I hope your Vikings continue to tease you, though, because if they do, that just means there's a little better luck for my Cowboys to make it into the playoffs. And that's what we need, at least to get a good seed anyway. Ron Fun, we're going to turn it over to you. How did you come out last week in week 10, my man?
Last week I didn't fare as well as I wanted to, man. And the reason being is not because I picked the wrong players, right? We picked Dalvin Cook. We talked about it on the show. He smashed. We picked several other folks, but I just got my running backs wrong. I did not focus on that injury report strong enough. I did not get my my cheap running backs in. Mark Ingram smashed. He was really cheap. He was highly owned. And I took the risk that I didn't want to go chalky. I thought that there was going to be some better plays not going chalky. But again, going in the cash game, you should stick with the chalk. If you know what it's going to be, why take that risk? And in tournament plays, you deviate. Just like Nate said, deviating to Dalvin Cook in the tournament paid off. But deviating in the cash game did not pay off. So I sometimes don't like always listening to the injury reports, and that's my clock going off telling me it's time for me to shut up about that. So perfect.
It's all good, man. It's all good. But still, like you said, you did get a hold of Dalvin Cook, who had 24 rushes at 94 yards and a touchdown. And of course, Kirk Cousins didn't do bad. I can't remember what his price was, but he wasn't one of the high quarterbacks. I don't believe he had just under 300 yards passing, 2 TDs, and of course, no interceptions, which is the big thing. That's what helps you get over the hump to win those games. And then on the other side of the ball, go ahead, Ron.
Now I was going to say the last thing is I messed around and went too much all in on them Tampa Bay Bucks. Tom Brady just let me down. Mike Evans was in a smash spot. Brady was in a smash spot going up against the Washington football team, who gives up the most fantasy points to quarterbacks. And Brady just goes in and lays a dud, throws interceptions. Mike Evans garbage. Everybody's garbage. So like between getting my running backs wrong and being overly concentrated in the Bucks game on the wrong side of the Bucks game, it wasn't a good. It was
Right.
a disaster for me last week. But we're gonna bounce back this week. I can tell you that.
Yeah, you're right about that game, man. I saw a lot of the Bucks receivers have dropped balls, and of course, Brady had 2 interceptions, which is not Brady like, and he only passed for 220 yards, but he did have 2 touchdowns. Of course, Chris Godwin, he had 7 receptions, but only 57 yards, no TDs. And I think Mike Evans had only 2 receptions for like 62 yards, 1 touchdown. So and then Washington went really run strong. So they were trying to really control the field, which is what you do when it starts getting cold, And then we talked about Terry McLaurin maybe having to play that catch-up game. But when you're at home and you're leading, guess what? You don't have to play catch-up with your Terry McLaurin. You give it to your running back. You go ahead and let Antonio Gibson have 24 rushes and let him get 2 touchdowns, which is exactly what Washington did. So, of course, we didn't see that coming last week. We don't know how it works. This is the fun part about fantasy football. When you think you're overconfident, you're going in with Tom Brady playing against those Washington, whatever their name is now, Skins. Then then we're just waiting to see what happens. Yeah, exactly. So we're just waiting to see what Brady does. But Brady laid an egg. He went the wrong way. And of course, as a Cowboy fan, I needed Brady to win that game, so we can continue to control our division. But let's move on. Another game we talked about real quick, Ron Fun. Remember we talked about the Atlanta-Dallas game, and we said, I think we had Dak Prescott. What'd you think about that one, Ron Fun? I'm going to let you answer that with Dak Prescott, Mr. Kansas City.
Oh, man, Dak lit it up. It was a great game. We thought it was going to be high scoring. But the issue was we thought Atlanta was going to show up to the game. We thought, Atlanta just didn't show up. And so for all my fans out there that listen to me with regards to stacking that game, I am sorry. I told you to stack and bring back. I told you to stack Dak, CD. I told you to get all the Dallas guys and bring it back with some cheap guys on the Falcons. And you know what? The Falcons just didn't show up. So it is what it is.
Yeah, they didn't. I mean, Matt Ryan had under 120 yards passing, and Kyle Pitts was his main man with 60 yards in the air on only 4 receptions. So, I mean, like you said, Atlanta did not show up. Nate, any games last week impressed you besides the ones you talked about? Anything that you kind of stuck out in your mind?
You guys hit them. I actually was bitterly disappointed by Tom Brady and the Bucs' lack of performance. Because right behind my main guy, Josh Allen, to Diggs, I had plenty of stacks of Brady to Godwin, Brady to Evans, sprinkled in those 2 tight ends because Gronk was out, none of which worked out. So I am so thankful for Josh Allen to Diggs coming through with me, for me big time.
Yeah, they did come through for you big time in that game, 62-point game. That was awesome. So fantasy audience, as you can see, the guys, they were right in on the games. However, sometimes we just get a little mixed up on getting the right picks inside the game, but we had inside the high-scoring games, and sometimes it's up to the players to perform the way we need them to perform. In this case, they didn't. So real quick, we're going to take a break, fantasy audience, and when we come back, we're going to be talking about a little bit of Nostradamus Nate and how he is going to help the listeners get ahead and what they should do and shouldn't do in the start 'em and sit 'em section. And he's going to have a nasty Nostradamus Nate pick or it's the Nostradamus Nate nasty pick is what he's going to have for us. And then, of course, Ron Fun is going to talk about which games look good to him. And then Nate is also going to drop us another that might help us in some of those late games. And that's going to be coming up next. So stay tuned right here on Tobacco Road Sports, on Tobacco Road Sports Radio, where this is Fantasy Football Come True. And welcome back, fantasy audience. I'm your host, Hot Rod Funderburk. I am joined by my co-host, Ron Fun. And of course, we're here just chopping it up, talking a little fantasy football. And Nostradamus Nate has joined us this week, and we're probably going to try and make him a permanent addition to the show. He does an excellent job. We love having him on. He brings that energy. He is the man. So, Nate, we're going to get right on into it, man. You had some nuggets that we talked about for our fantasy, and I would love for you to just go over some of those again and let the fantasy audience hear where you come from.
Yeah, so I'll do it kind of in this context of giving a slate overview and where we should, really be focusing our kind of fantasy plays in terms of the games, right? So, wow, how excited are we for the granddaddy of them all, the Cowboys versus Chiefs game, right? That's sitting at a 56 and a half point game total. Yep. And it's the highest total on the slate by far, right? The next closest is 50 points. So 6.5 point, kind of premium there for playing guys in the Cowboys Chiefs game. And, this could really be back and forth, high scoring shootout. Vegas is projecting it at a 2.5 point spread in favor of the Chiefs there, Rod. But any way you cut it, we could really see a game environment that is rich for fantasy points, right? So you could either roll with Mahomes and stack him with one or two of his pass catchers and bring it back on the other side with a Cowboy, or do the reverse. You could play Dak and pair him with Lamb, Cooper, Schultz, or Gallup and bring it back with a KC pass catcher. The biggest consideration for me when I'm constructing my tourney lineups is these lower cost pass catchers from each team, right? So on the KC side, you got Byron Pringle, right? He's sitting at 3.4K. And a lot of y'all were probably like, Byron Pringle, who's that? And, he actually came through last week. He had 5 targets and he scored a TD, right? And I think, Ron Fun, you talked about how defenses have figured KC out, right? And they're playing with those 2 high safeties, forcing Mahomes to kind of check down, do these short to intermediate routes. And, Mahomes has adapted, right? And so, he's getting more pass catchers beyond the Kelsey and the Tyreek involved, including Byron Pringle. So that's, something that is kind of juggling around in my mind around whether or not I should play him in the stacks or, as a, single piece to kind of round out my lineups that aren't stacked in this game. But another low cost piece is Michael Gallup, right? So he came off IR last week for your boys there, and he's sitting at 4.2K, and he looked really good last week. He ended up with 25% of the targets that Dak was doling out and 35% of the air yards in that game, right? So Gallup is a guy that I'm likely going to have some decent exposure to, unless, Rod, boots on the ground. You can talk me down from it. What do you think? Is this 25% of targets and 35% of air share yards going to persist into week 11, or was it a one-time week 10 deal?
Nate, I'm going to be honest with you, man. I feel like Michael Gallup can continue to keep coming on. He and Dak had a great rapport even last year when things just fell apart for the Cowboys before Dak got hurt. He was going to Gallup, and then, of course, Gallup spent some time out this season. But I tell you what, Gallup is one of those guys that defenses don't really think about. When you think about the Cowboys, you're thinking about Amari Cooper, of course. You're thinking about CeeDee Lamb. You're figuring out how you're going to lock these guys out. As a matter of fact, you're even thinking about Wilson, and probably starting to get on your radar is the tight end and Schultz. So with Michael Gallup being out with the injury, he's probably going to be that guy that people kind of defenses just overlook. And he's really going to, in my opinion, be an opportunity to give some good fantasy points. So to answer your question, yes, put Gallup in. I think he can really come on with him. Dak Prescott this tomorrow with the Chiefs.
So you're saying start Gallup, huh? I like it. Good stuff.
Hey, if you asking me about starting Gallup, I'm telling you start Gallup all day long.
Love it. I love it.
Yes,
one
yes,
last note on the
Well,
Dallas side of the ball. As odd as it may sound, I think CeeDee Lamb is going to be pretty low owned because of his price point relative to a handful of other elite wide receivers that fantasy players are going to want to play instead of Gallup. So Tyreek, Diggs, Debo, Jamar Chase, those are guys that are priced on DK within $500 of CeeDee Lamb that people may want to click opposed to going to CeeDee Lamb. So, I wouldn't necessarily, not play CeeDee Lamb and actually maybe a good, especially tournament play, because he may be a little bit lower owned relative to those other big dogs that are sitting around his price point.
That is an excellent point for our fantasy audience. That's awesome. Thanks, Nate.
Yeah.
Ron Fun. Ron Fun. I'm gonna go back to you, big guy. Any games coming up tomorrow that you see? You got your mouth watering a little bit?
Ron Fun, you're on mute there, brother.
The game I'm most excited about, we've talked in detail, is the Kansas City Chiefs and the Dallas Cowboys. So I'm going to pass on that one here. But what I'm really excited about is this Packers-Vikings game. I think that game has potential to really, really be escalated, right? It's a division rivalry game. You have Aaron Rodgers still coming off of the COVID scandal. And I believe that Devontae Adams, he's just the man there. And additionally, when you think about that game, all bets are off, period. Just all bets are off about that game. That game is going to be sneaky expensive. It's going to be higher than the 49 points that Vegas says. Kirk Cousins and Thielen, they work together very well. Kirk Cousins and Jefferson works together very well. I just really like the way that game is shaping up. But Rob, what I
100% agree with you. I'm excited about that game as well. I'm probably going to skinny stack it, so probably not have the quarterbacks and in that game, but skinny stacking it particularly with two players. A.J. Dillon is a great value, right? So the running back for Green Bay, Aaron Jones, went down with a knee injury last week. A.J. Dillon stepped in, and he got in the box 2 times last week. And he's sitting at 6.2K. So I absolutely think, that's a great value. Going to be really high owned, similar to Dearness Johnson and Mark Ingram of last week. But, exciting to play him. And you mentioned, great connection between Cousins and Thielen, as well as Justin Jefferson. He's the alpha now in that receiver core. But what I like about him is his price point. And this is going to sound odd, but I like it because it's so high. He's at 8.1K. And for similar reasons, as we were talking about CeeDee Lamb, there's other guys around him that, seem more attractive to press the button on than Justin Jefferson. So you could get Justin at reasonably low ownership for another week. I just can't figure it out why fantasy players aren't pushing the button, slamming the button every week on Justin. But again, you can probably get him for a pretty low price and get some leverage on the field.
And Rob, what else I'm excited about is the fact that I just like weak defenses, period. The games don't necessarily have to be like the highest Vegas over, whatever. I just love weak defenses. And I'm going to tell the fans, this week, the defenses to target with regards to wide receivers. You need to target defenses going against the Washington football team this week. You need to target the Saints and the Titans and the Bears. These teams that I have listed right here give up the most fantasy football points to wide receivers. So really, man, I am looking for cheap wide receivers that are going against these particular teams right here. And I think if you just keep your process simple, you will win. And then I'm gonna give the fans one last nugget, because I know we're short on time. With regards to games I'm looking at, I'm going against running backs against these games. You might want to shy away from the Jets game, but I'm going against the Chargers. I'm going against the Seahawks and the Lions. Target cheap running backs in any of these games. You will be just fine. Trust the process. Target weak defenses.
Yeah. And hey, just about the process.
Thanks
here.
for that.
Yeah. Rob, can I just drop for the people just something
Go ahead, Nate. Go ahead, buddy.
Taking a look at as I looked at this slate. So again, the KC Cowboys game is sitting at 56.5. but there's 4 other games that are between 49 and 50 point totals. And of these 5 games, including the Cowboys-Chiefs game, 3 of those 5 start at the 4 p.m. portion of the slate, right? So this is a great opportunity to deploy what's called the late swap strategy, right? So for those that are not familiar, the late swap strategy is all about swapping to players in the later games that you have an opportunity to do so. I really think that you can load up on high risk but high reward players in those 1 p.m. games, right? And, around middle of the 4th quarter of the 1 p.m. games, if those high risk, high reward players are really working out, then you can pivot to players that are maybe going to be higher owned, but, kind of safer plays to, preserve or increase your position on the leaderboard, right? If the contrary happens, if those high risk, high reward players are kind of average and you're out of the green currently going into the 4 p.m. games, then the late swap strategy is, put all your chips in on more high risk, high reward guys, because you really at that point have nothing to lose, but everything to gain in terms of getting back into the green. So this slate really sets up nicely for that late swap strategy because of these 3 high total games in the late afternoon.
No doubt.
Oh, thank you for that late swaps strategy, Nate. Something that the audience needed to hear. And just for time, fantasy audience, we're going to have to go ahead and wrap it up. We didn't get an opportunity to do our start 'em or sit 'em segment, but there is one player that I want to give you 30 seconds, Nate, just to call out real quick, whether you start or sit him. He's got a lot of hoopla around him this week because he had a great week last week. And he says he's back. That is Cam Newton, quarterback for the Panthers. Would you start or sit this young man? 30 seconds, Nate.
Yeah, he's back pounding. I would actually start him, right? He's at a really good price point, right? He obviously uses his legs, so you got that floor of rushing and the rushing TD equity. So definitely start him in your cash games at least, not so much in your tournaments. And I would also say that Nostradamus Nate's nasty play of the week, this play that you'll have to kind of hold your nose a little bit before you press the button on him, comes from this game. He's, one of Cam's pass catchers. I would highly consider going with who's the receiver from Nope, the other one.
Robbie Anderson.
Robbie Anderson. Yeah, baby.
Yeah.
So okay. I know
Hey.
came up in your mouth when you thought about Robbie Anderson, but he started to hit a little bit last week. He did get in the box. And, when you're playing fantasy, yes, you got to do the analytics, do the hard numbers, but you also got to play narrative street. You got to do that qualitative analysis. And there is no locker room in the NFL that's more enthused right now than, the Panthers locker room with Cam back. And there is no bigger, teammates that are more enthused to be together than Cam and Robbie, right? They got a bromance going on. So I can absolutely see them, kind of Cam to Robbie all day on Sunday and racking you up some nice fantasy points at a pretty low price, right? So that's the other thing, really good value. So Nostradamus Nate's nasty pick of the week.
Well, Nate, we're going to look forward to see what happens, my man. And fantasy audience, we have reached the end of our show. But if you ever need to reach Ron Fun or Nate, they're going to let you know how to do it at the fingertips. Ron Fun, how can the audience get in touch with you if they need you?
Hey, hit me on any social media with the handle at Ron Fun. You can hit me on Instagram or Twitter with the social media handle at Ron Fun.
And Nate, how can the folks get a hold of you?
Yeah, again, I'm a social media dinosaur. So the best way to get me is to go through the social media king, the man that when he posts stuff like the lights dim because he's taking up so much energy, go through Ron Fun, but you can also hit me up on Facebook. Last name's Norstrud, spelled Norstrud. Happy to help you out with any questions that you have as you're considering this upcoming week slate.
Sounds great. Well, on behalf of my co-host Ron Fun and special guest Nostradamus Nate, I'm your host Hot Rod Ferg. Make sure you guys tune in next week to another edition of Fantasy Football Come True right here on Tobacco Road Sports Radio, the show that wants to see you put some money in your pocket.